The ability to deliver impactful presentations is more than just a professional skill. It's a strategic advantage. So whether you're in a boardroom or you're in a classroom or you're in a virtual meeting, the art of making presentations or PPTs or PowerPoint templates, what we call it as, and presenting the information with clarity, with conviction, and engaging the audience is very, very critical. So now making presentations, when you're putting in information into slides, this has become literally like the backbone of doing a business communication or a academic discourse or a professional presentation. So this has become like very, very important. Today you make presentations even when you're in college. So when you start working, this becomes even more important, because that's the way you are communicating what you're thinking about an idea. So it's not like having a good idea is the only thing that is important, but to communicate that idea through the slides that you're going to be preparing is equally important. And that's the reason we're going to be talking about that today, that what are the key principles, the tools that you can use to make very effective presentations in your career that you're starting or you're already working, how it will help you in your work life. So let's look at some of the principles in today's episode. Hello everyone, this is Sonia. You with me on Thinking Out Loud Thursdays, and we're going to be having our coffee together. But before that, do subscribe to my channel if you've still not done so. Oh, that's a very nice black coffee that I'm having. So, but before we start again, like I always say, I've just turned an author. My first book is out on Amazon, Career Chaos and Coffee Stains. Do grab your copy if you've still not done so, because it talks about a lot of chaos that we often face in our work life and all the mishaps that we face and how do we overcome them, which I have related it to coffee stains. And so it's a very interesting book. I would love to hear your feedback on my book. So please grab your copy. The links are also given below. Otherwise, you can go on Amazon and type either my name or just write Career Chaos and Coffee Stains and you'll get the book. Right, so let's get started with today's episode, which is how do we make our presentations more effective, more impactful and more engaging, so that we're able to make a good impression on the audience, and it helps us change the perception about us for others as well, right? So let's get started. So before you start making any presentation, we need to understand that PowerPoint presentations are not just, gathering few slides together. It's basically an artful construction of information. It is seamless flow of information, and it requires a very strategic approach, right? So which can actually then transform the information into a very captive narrative, right? Do you agree with me? So let's explore what are the things that you need to keep in mind. So number one, what you need to take into consideration is that you should know what is your purpose of making that presentation. See, it always boils down, I keep saying this again and again in most of my videos which are relevant to the subject that I'm talking about. So here also you need to know what is the purpose of making that presentation. Why are you making it? What do you want to achieve out of making that presentation? So do you want to make a presentation which is aligned, you want to take some budgetary approvals, you are wanting to communicate the market trends, or you wanting to communicate about the time management, etc. So what is the purpose of your making the presentations? Then you can relate all the slides which would align to the purpose of your purpose that you're wanting to derive out of, what you want to achieve out of it, right? So always before you start, whether you're very short on time, your boss just told you I need this presentation by tomorrow, but before you start, spend at least 5 minutes thinking why the boss needs this presentation. What is he trying to achieve if I'm giving him this presentation? So always look at what is the end result of doing that work that you're planning to do, right? So please do that. Define what is the purpose before you start your presentation work, right? Number two, look at the flow. So you need to look at a very logical sequence. Your one slide should lead to the other, to the other, to the other, right? It should not be very haphazard movement of one information which is not connected to the second slide, and maybe your first slide is connected to the fifth slide, but you've altered the sequence. So if you're looking at, say, you're making a marketing presentation, me being a marketer, so maybe I'll give you a marketing example. So if you want to, if your presentation is all about the quarterly performance, so maybe your first slide is talking about, how did the quarter go. Then your next slide is looking at into breaking up that, main statistics you're bringing into by putting up a graph or something which says, this is the budget spent, these are the number of leads we got, these are the number of qualified leads we had, this is the sales volume that we generated, how many campaigns did we do. So it actually encapsulate a lot of information. So you're talking first about what you did in that quarter, then you talk about what are the other add-on initiatives that you did that the campaigns performed a lot, then you talk about how the market has performed, how the market has evolved, what are the customers talking about in terms of your product, and then you can talk about what is your next steps that you want to do, what is your next quarter targets that you're taking, what are the new things that you're wanting to do in the next. So please remember, the sequence is very, very important, because that's going to keep your audience very engaged with what you're going to present about it. So make sure that your first slide is slightly leading to the second and the second and the second, because when you're sitting in the audience, you've looked at the first slide, you automatically start anticipating, okay, the next slide should capture this. So if the audience have that in mind and you've already captured that, that really gives a very good feeling to the audience when they're sitting and listening to you when you're presenting those slides in front of them. So please remember that you have a good sequence, you have a logical sequence where one slide is leading to the next, right? Number 3, please look at a very consistent design, right? So when you're making these PowerPoint templates, so if your company already has like a company template to make your presentations, use that. If you feel you want to make some edits in that template, then you should be aware of it, that what are the changes that the company allow you to make in that company template. So don't just keep making changes in it, because it's a brand after all that you're representing, and not everybody can change the brand positioning or the look of the brand, even if it's a simple presentation that you're making, right? So make sure your design is very consistent. Your fonts, because the companies will give you some little font types that you can use, but certainly the size of the font, whether you want to use a calligraphic font, whether you want to use a standard font, so depending, and what are the colors that you're using in your, what is the formatting that you're giving, what is the visual appeal that you're adding to your slides, actually will give a very unified message to the audience that you're presenting. So please make sure that you have a very consistent design where your colors, formatting, everything is in order, and it's not like your first slide has everything in order and your next slide, your fonts are bigger or your fonts are smaller, and the audience will find that disruption. Even if you feel, somewhere you've used a 22 size font and the next page you use an 18 size for the headline, people will notice that, and they may not say it, but their eye movement, it will not look like a consistent flow, right? So please make sure that you use a design which is consistent in terms of all these elements, which is related to the color, the font, the formatting that you use, the visual appeal that you're adding to it. Please look into these things, because these small little things can actually make or break the impression of your presentation, right? Number 4, look at a visual hierarchy. So when I say visual hierarchy, meaning, I'm sure in your slides there would be few words that you would like to emphasize. You would like to make sure that the audience really looks at those words when you're presenting that. So make sure your key points, if you're wanting to emphasize in your few of the slides, then they should stand out. That's all it means as a visual hierarchy. So whichever points that you want to emphasize in your slide or lot of slides, then make sure that they stand out. because then it's very easy. Maybe the person is listening to you, he didn't look at the screen when you were presenting, so the person will not look at what you've put it as, which should stand out in that slide. So please make sure, but when you actually make it stand out, then even if the person is looking at you when you're talking, the person will obviously glance, because there's few words in that slide are standing out, and which is a good practice to do that. Please follow this, because then whatever is your key information that you want people to take, maybe they'll start making notes as well of what you're presenting, right? So please do that. Maintain visual hierarchy. Number 5, please do not put, this is a very common mistake that most of the people do, is they put too much information into one slide. Now please understand that when you're presenting, if you make your slide very content heavy, people will not bother reading your slide. And what is the purpose if you're actually doing so much hard work into making that presentation and people are not even looking at that slide, then it's not something that is making an impact on the audience, right? So when you're making a presentation, please make sure that your slide is not very content heavy. If you want to add bullet points, and bullet points may just write whatever that you want to write, and a slide should not have more than 4 to 5 bullet points, because you have to make sure that the font size is clear enough for people that when it's projected on a screen, it's visibly, it is clear for people to read also. They're not like struggling to see, okay, what's written on the slide. So make sure that your slides are not very content heavy. You can use bullet points, but don't try and use too many bullet points, because again, it's going to make it very cluttered and very unorganized, right? So please make it concise. Use your content in the right manner in each of the slides, right? The next, number 6, is engaging headlines. Now, I've seen a lot of people making a very remarkable presentations where, the headlines are exactly what the whole slide is going to be about. So the people, when they look at the headline, is immediately they would want to read through the slide as well, right? So please make sure that you're using relevant headlines which are very engaging with the audience. So for example, if you're talking about customer experience, then maybe your slide talks about crafting customer experiences. You're talking about technology trends, or you're talking about social media impact on the product that you've just launched, or you're talking about some new budgeting strategies for success of whatever that you're wanting to do. So make sure that your headlines are actually in line with whatever that you're wanting to present. They should not be like totally off the place here and there, etc. Right? So next is, try and use a lot of visuals. Use infographics if you have to, use graphs, use charts, because those charts are more interesting for an audience to look at and understand, rather than putting an Excel sheet, copy paste it. I've seen a lot of people doing this. We are lazy, we want to make presentation, but we don't want to innovate, we don't want to try new things. So हम लोग क्या करते हैं, अगर डेटा है तो Excel sheet पे पूरा डेटा किया, उसे copy paste करके डाल दिया. But okay, you can do that. But what if that Excel sheet, you convert it into a pie chart or a line diagram, or you use some infographics? Won't that be more engaging for the audience? Because you're making this presentation not for yourself, but you're making it for others, because you want to communicate your story to them, right? And your story will become only more interesting if you make it interesting visually to people, right? So please use visuals. It's very good. If you're using some stock images, use some high resolution stock images. It should not be you've used a very low resolution, and when you're trying to enlarge the image, it's all pixelated. So take these small little things into consideration. It will help you in making good presentations, right? So, and the next one that you can look at doing is add transition. So once your entire presentation, say you've made some 20 slides or 30 slides, now is the time you should now dress up. Like, it's like the cherry on the cake. Try to do that. Add some transitions, add some effects or animations to your entire presentation, which is like when you're moving from one slide to the other, or when you're looking line by line. If there is a presentation, you don't want the whole slide to come in, but when you move to the next slide, you only want the first line to come. So try and add transitions maybe in the slides itself, or if you want the whole slide, the entire content to come at once, then maybe use some transitions from first slide to the other. Maybe moving from left to right, or right to left, or top to bottom, or bottom to top, or there's something like a fading effect, or there's something like a sparkle effect. So depending on, what is the purpose, how is it, like a fun kind of a presentation you're making, is it something serious that you're making, accordingly use the transitions, but don't use too many transitions, because that becomes a very distracting factor for the audience. Use transitions because you're going to use these transitions to capture the attention of the audience, not create a distraction for your audiences, right? So please make sure that you use these transitions very carefully, but do use them. Don't just ignore them, because it's a good thing to use these transitions, right? The next is, do something in your presentations to build engagement with the audience. Maybe after a few slides you can put a question, like asking people to comment on anything related to the subject, not for the heck of it, but anything related to the subject. You can put up a question. You can probably put up a poll question and ask people to give their opinions, and you can record their opinions as well, right? So that's a good way to engage with the audience. If the purpose of your presentation involves other people's opinions, then make sure after few slides you can add a question, add a poll, add a contest where people can then respond, and it becomes quite like a two-way communication when you're doing these presentations, right? The last thing that I want to talk about is conclusion and the final slide. So I've seen a lot of people doing very good presentations, but somehow when you're concluding the presentation, it's like to say कि पूरी energy निकल गई हमारी, right? But please understand, your last slide is the slide that people will carry with them, because अगर आपकी 1 घंटे की presentation है, people have been really concentrating on what you're trying to communicate, बट आपका 1 घंटा निकल गया. अब लास्ट 2 स्लाइड जहाँ पे आप कंक्लूड कर रहे हो, व्हाट आर द की टेकअवेज दैट यू वांट पीपल टू टेक विद देम व्हेन दे आर गोइंग आउट ऑफ द मीटिंग? व्हाट आर द नेक्स्ट स्टेप्स आफ्टर दैट प्रेजेंटेशन दैट यू वांट देम टू think through or take it with them and then come back to you with? So please make sure that you use a conclusion slide, maybe 1 or 2 slides in that, where you talk about, you can summarize what the whole presentation was. So any key points that you would want them to emphasize, want them to take them with them. So make sure that your conclusion is basically like a summary slide, which has some next steps, which some key takeaways, and you put your call to action, which is a CTA. What would you want them to take an action basis on your information that you've given? So please make sure that you adhere to some of these, rather all of these principles that I've shared with you, right? Let me have a sip of my coffee. Now, before I end, I just want to say, when you're making presentations, please also respect other people's time. So as much as you're very enthusiastic, you're very motivated, you want to put in all the information, please make sure that you stick to the time that is given to you. So if you've been given 1 hour for that presentation, make sure that you finish your presentation in about 45 minutes and you leave 15 minutes to discuss if there are any questions coming from the audience and you would like to answer that. Please do not make the presentation for 1 hour 15 minutes or even 1 hour 5 minutes also, because you should always leave about 5 to 10 minutes for engaging with the audience. If there are any questions, if there's any feedback, if people want to share some their experiences, etc. But respect people's time. Do not make so many slides that you're not able to finish that only in that meeting, right? So I think I've shared most of the principles. It's very crucial to look at these principles and tools for the success of your presentation, because each slide, each headline that you do, each headline that you make has a very set purpose in guiding the audience overall with the agenda of your presentation, right? because the flow is all about crafting a very seamless experience that captivates the attention of the audience and makes them understand what you want them to understand, right? So I hope that your future presentations are very aligned and people are very happy with your presentations, and keep growing in your life, do very well in your work life, and otherwise too. On that note, I'm going to end my Thinking Out Loud Thursdays. I hope that you could take some value out of this content that I've created for you, and do leave your comments if you really liked my video, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Yes, so please have a fabulous day everyone, and I'm going to see you next Thursday. Bye bye.